All right, well, good morning and welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Heavyweights Podcast, Friday edition. And I am Ashton Hines. I have been saying that I've been a realtor for a little over 2 years, and actually, I lost a year in my life. I've actually been a realtor for a little over 3 years. And I was just kind of sitting down looking at stuff the other day, and it was kind of cool to look back. But yeah, a little over 3 years. I just closed on my fourth flip. It's pending. We're closing January 3rd. So I've been working in that journey. I also work full-time as a real estate. I don't work full-time as a real estate. I work full-time.
Hey,
I work.
Speak it into existence.
Okay.
Ashton.
I've been talking about going full-time into real estate. So here soon I will be going full-time real estate. However, right now I work full-time as a physical therapist assistant doing home health, helping people after their surgeries and when they have a tendency to fall and you know, sometimes I help them put up light bulbs, and I put an angel on top of a Christmas tree last week because an 80-year-old should not be up on a stepladder, and you know, it's hard to turn that down. So that dulcet voice, that kind voice you hear chiming in, that is my friend, mentor, good dude in the real estate industry, Tavis Westbrook. What's up, Tavis?
What up? What up? Man, I'm doing great. It's funny. I've got all kinds of visions in my mind of how many times that, you know, you get milk and cookies showing up to one of these appointments, you know, because they think you're their grandson.
You know, what's funny? So Karen, my wife, she also does therapy, and she's been doing it for 23 years. For whatever, you know, I'll say this. I see a lot of them in the middle. So she'll see him first, and then she always has to be the last visit. I can see him in the middle. That's just the part of the degree. And I have a 2-year degree for therapy. She has a master's. Now it's a PhD. But yeah, so she gets a lot of gifts. You know, she'll come home with, oh yeah, they gave me this and gift card, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, and I get stuff every once in a while. The worst gift I've ever received, I actually had a family. They happen to not be from the United States. And for them, they really wanted to say thank you. And one day they made me warm mango milk. And I had just started some sort of like keto something. So anyway, I didn't want to do it, but it was warm milk. It was a no for me. And it had some more mango pulp or something in there. And they poured it. They were so excited. You know, it's like that wedding singer scene where she hands him the meatballs of like trying to pay him in meatballs for a singing lesson. It's like, it was that. And they handed it to me, and I took the smallest sip and like raised my eyebrows. Like, oh man, that's great. And they're like, oh, okay, you like it? Well, go ahead, drink it all. Well, wait, they made me drink the whole thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, I am going to throw up. So yeah, in theory, it's really cool. But the other day I had the classic gift of this guy. He got up and gave me 2 Werther's Originals on my way out. So that was also amazing. So yeah, you know, you get super sweet people, and I really enjoy. I love doing therapy, but honestly, the times when I feel most useful to people, you know, we're going into their houses a couple times a week, and sometimes I'm the only person they're going to see for a while, and they're homebound. That's why I'm there. And yeah, I mean, I have taken doors off of hinges. I have removed glass shower doors off of showers that were too heavy to push out of the way. I've helped take things down from the attic. It's a really interesting job. I've obviously moved furniture and stuff, and it's really cool. I do enjoy it. But as I said earlier, I have all the intentions in the world to go full-time real estate. I'm so close. I'm closing on this flip in Mapleton on Mapleton in January. And then I have a retail listing with Josh and Krista that's closing December 22nd. And I've got a few irons in the fire, like some really warm leads. And it's like, look, if I could just land a couple more.
Good to say. Like,
yeah, it does.
I mean, we're now having a conversation about this closing, and you're pending. I don't remember what we talked about last time when we.
We're pending.
When we did our last podcast, talked about Mapleton, but I mean, you're pending now.
Mm-hmm.
You got through inspections. It wasn't horrible. Way different than your last experience, and now you're looking for a closing table, and you're actually let's talk about it. You're on the positive side. Out of all of this crazy learning lessons and
I know, what are we going to talk
about?
You know, it's like I mean, I've had this flip for over a year now. I actually just went over and delivered my my mortgage payment, my interest payment to my lender, and I always have to drive it to her credit union. And I sat there and I looked at the invoice, and it said invoice number 13. And I was like, man, this is and so what, and the girl was giving me a hard time. She's like, oh, have you been here? But actually, I've been here 13 times. Y'all act like I'm new every time, but I have been here 13 times. And I was just like, man, it will feel like such a relief to be on the other side of it. But, I'm going to get to make a little bit of money. We're going to come out on the positive, pay off some debt and some credit cards. And I'll have to tell the story at some point of how tapped out I am. I am not ready to divulge all the details of how tapped out I am, but let's just I'm tapped, if this thing was going further, I don't know what I'm gonna have to get real creative. So
what's cool though is I think you've made really good connection with the lenders, right? So I mean, like, the people that have given you money, they're happy.
Yeah.
I mean, because this exceeded their expectation, and
yeah.
I mean, fortunately, they didn't hold your feet to the fire 6 months in either, right? And be like,
no,
hey,
they extended
your notes due. But I mean, you pay them on time. They've trusted you in this project. They've seen you right along.
Yep.
They're learning too. And I mean,
it's been great.
Full circle now. And, we're not closed yet, so we won't,
right.
Won't jinx it, but
nope,
I mean,
no, not popping champagne just yet. But yeah, you're right. And it's interesting for me. You're getting into the private money. You could have accessed private money. I know you could. You have people that would buy into the Tavis Westbrook idea, and I've seen some of your record keeping, and it is immaculate. So, I know you'll be able to find money, but you just have never gone that route. And I started out with that route because I didn't have options. I had my very first house. I had an opportunity to buy it. And I committed to buying it before I had any idea how I was going to do it. And it was a probate deal, and I backed into it. So I had a runway to help figure it out, but I had to do the creative financing. I borrowed against my 401k at a really low interest rate. I did the deal, paid it back, and then, I did a hard money loan, but I needed help with the down payment for the hard money loan. So I had some friends who were interested in investing, and they said, look, we'll put the money up for that. And they trusted me as a person, really not as an investor, but just me as a person. And then I had, someone saw the success of that. They said, wow, can I do that with you? Sure. And so then we did that. And now I've met another person, and actually two more people that are kind of in the wings of like, hey, if you get a deal, let me know. So it's really interesting how that goes. And you learn how to structure things that way, and then eventually I would love to get into some lower priced bank loans like you do. 'Cause hard money is really easy. To get, not easy, but I mean, when they transfer it, it's really quick, and it's typically a text like, hey, can you wire that? We talked about it. But a bank, it's way more complicated, but it's cheaper. So we'll get into that. But yeah, super exciting time of year. I couldn't be happier to where I am. And we're going to get into a little bit of talk about goals and that sort of thing later in the day, later in the episode. But before that, why don't we go ahead and check in? We're in the DFW area, Tavis and I. We both live in North DFW. Tavis lives in Plano. I live in Carrollton. So let's do a little bit of a market update. So the market is, it's an interesting one. I was reading an article from Redfin that said we ticked up in mortgage applications 15% from what was a 28-year low at the beginning of November on mortgage applications. I mean, it bottomed. I mean, think about 28 years of real estate in the United States. And so in a way, we're kind of in a generational dip as far as that's concerned. A lot of people have just never experienced this on the younger side for sure. So that's really interesting to think about. The days on market in DFW on the overall MLS are 29. The inventory's 3.2 months. The overall percentage of asking. So that's another statistic we can look at. So when someone lists a home and then it actually sells and we can see the close price, they keep track of the discounts that are taken. And right now we're a little bit above 96, which is on a downward trend. And I think that, you can tell us, Tavis, but to me that hints at people are still mispricing a little bit. And it's also the market might be slowing down because of December, and that's just natural. And so they're trying to price things, but the market is coming back a little bit. And so 96% of asking is still not horrible. I know with Josh and Krista recently, we ended up, our offer was around 97. And so, that's what we're experiencing too. So, what are you seeing as far as the market goes and movement? And I know you talk to a lot of agents. What are they seeing?
Yeah, I think statistically, this time of year always slows down a little bit. We pretty much lose. If you want to look at it in reality, it's almost 4 weeks, and it's not consistent. I mean, it splits up. You lose around 2 weeks, around Thanksgiving, and then you lose, another 2 weeks at least. Christmas and New Year's kind of thing. People traveling, kids are out of school. Either got family in town, you're decorated for the holidays, stuff like that, right? So that
Mm-hmm.
statistically has always changed over the last couple of years. um, we still saw a lot of movement through the holiday timeline, and I think that was due to lower interest rates and lack of inventory. And so now with interest rates higher, and again, just kind of working our way. I mean, we're still in a seller's market, but we're working our way to more of the stable market. When we get about 6 months of inventory, more of a stabilized um, market from that, from inventory levels. Um, so I think it's just important to kind of know that we've got that situation. Obviously, the Fed regulating the rates like they're doing and going up and down a little bit is
Average
giving
rate right now is about 7%. It's down for, in the last 6 months it's down, but it's hovering around 7%.
Yeah, so it's given us some hope. I will say, my nephew, we found a opportunity for him on the investment side to buy a rental, and putting down 25% on the 30-year. He was quoted at like 6.99%. So it
Cool.
actually, was not bad for an investment property. Um, so it was it's tangible. I mean, it's something that we run the numbers and look at. I mean, that's not out of whack, right? To look at it and see if we can make the numbers work to actually cash flow with that. Mind you, the property was, you know, not anywhere here in Metro, right? It was further. I was actually in Bonham, where
Hmm.
we were looking for him. But, um, anyways, I think I think we're going to start seeing some things shift into January, which is always exciting. Talking to people and just kind of seeing things move that way. I think this time of year, everybody's kind of getting ready for the new year and new goal setting, and you know what's going to happen with you know putting your property on the market. People are waiting until after the holidays and do it in January. I think you hit the nail on the head earlier talking. We're still seeing lots of price reductions. I mean, people are still getting values wrong. And they're having to chase the market a little bit to see where that number is. And, I can't talk about that enough. I think if you know what you're doing, the proof was exactly with your flip here on Mapleton. I mean,
Yep.
you hit the nail on the head. I mean, first showing, first offer, over asking.
Hmm.
You can't get any better than that. So they wanted to do the deal. They were serious. The offer was clean. You had a couple other showings that day, but nobody was like really ready to pull the trigger as much as the first people were. And so, anyways, they
And to that point, I was, I know some people will think, well, you left some money on the table. I thought that a little bit,
yeah,
but the more you look at the big picture, and I think this is for any seller, like, what's your goal?
yeah.
Is your goal to get literally the top dollar out of this? Okay, then you might want to price a little high and just try to just beat them up and come down as little as you can. But if your goal is to sell this, move on, free up capital, free up mental space, all those things, then I accomplished my goal in spades. You know, uh, Getting every little bitty last dime out of an investment property is not always the most beneficial. You can free
Well,
that up, you can deploy it somewhere else, you can pay off some, debt and that sort of thing. So for me, it accomplished everything I needed to. If
I
you
think
just look at one metric, maybe you could have gotten a little bit more money, but I was able to accomplish what I wanted to in a really quick period of time.
it's hard statistically. I used to do this in the traditional market of having a conversation with a seller. and it was basically like, what's it going to cost us? And you paying mortgage, utilities, principal and interest, uh, what's it costing you for 6 months to sit on the market? When you hear sellers say that all the time. Well, I don't care. I don't have to sell. I can wait. Reduce the price if I have to. If you sit on the market for 3 months, what's your cost? What's your burn rate? What's it costing you to sit on the market for 3 months? That doesn't make a lot of sense. If it's costing you $2,000 a month, that's $6,000, right? Um, to sit on the market and do that to eventually do a price reduction, and doing a price reduction of $5,000-6,000 typically it's not going to get you very far in the market, because that's usually within reason for somebody to negotiate, with you. And so if it's only a $5,000 or $6,000 price reduction, it's usually not going to be that effective in marketing, right? You usually see in bigger numbers, like, minimum of 10, 20, 30, 50. I mean, those kind of numbers and price reductions that we're seeing right now. Um, what's interesting in your situation, and we had this conversation, you had a listing that backed up to a busy road, just like you, on the same street, smaller footprint than yours. They've been sitting on the market for a couple months now, over 60 days, and they were holding out trying to get their price, right?
Yeah, they never dropped. Yeah.
They never dropped. They held out. And doing the math on that, I think you ran your numbers and you were like, dude, that would have cost me, what would that have cost you to sit on the market for?
It would have been at least 8,000. Yeah, at least
So it would have cost you $8,000 to sit on the market for 2 months, which ultimately they ended up pretty much right where your number was, right? I mean, with what they're negotiating when you talk to the agent, it took them that long. They burned $8,000, so essentially they made less net return than you did because it took them that much longer to do it. So, people get in their head though, and it's just people get really bullish sometimes on just that absolute number without thinking about truly what the net return is.
Yeah.
And
what is the net return to peace of mind? Because I lose sleep and I eat a lot when I'm stressed. So I've got to work on that. That's a me problem, but it's real. And whenever I'm stressed, I'm sure I'm not just a ton of fun to be around, So like that's just outside of just objective numbers. There is a human element to doing the flips and that stuff. And until you get, now I will say with you, I've become much more comfortable with the stress and more, comfortable with negotiating and all that stuff. I have, when I was on the Polkwin and Richardson, my goodness, I was really, really in rough shape, but this one's gotten better. But from a human element, there are times when you're like, look, I just need to be done. And I mean, this goes to the idea of a distressed seller. So people are like, why would anyone, for the 15th time today, someone's called me wanting to buy my house, and they offered me $200,000 lower than what Zillow said it's worth. Like, why would anyone ever do that? Well, there's humans and there's emotion and there's stress and there's financial problems. And if someone gets backed into a corner to where they don't have options and their only option is someone calling up and saying, hey, I'll give you a cash offer today, you can walk away in 2 weeks and sort of solve all these problems and start over, that has a huge value to people. It's not just about a dollar amount. And so I think when you start really seeing that, like, you understand why people sell low, why people would sell on the first offer. So anyway, I've learned a ton in that realm. So, well, we will keep an eye on the market. It'll be super interesting to see how the beginning of the year goes. They keep talking about dropping some rates. That being said, inflation report came out this week. It's still 3.1. Their target rate's 2. And it has come down, but it's sort of leveled out. And the job reports keep really screaming, and they're doing great. So there's a little bit of friction there. Like, hey, we're going to drop rates, but jobs are doing great, and inflation's still there. So we'll see how the Fed reacts, and it'll be a really fun ride in January to see where that goes. So why don't we talk about a little bit of news? So several articles came out in the DFW area this week. Tavis, one of the first sort of outings, kind of social things that we did, just had a good time, was Tavis invited me to a Mavericks game. And I actually did a video about that because I hopped in his truck. We meet up at Costco because that's kind of in between our houses, and I hopped in his truck and we took off towards the AAC downtown Dallas. And he was on a speaker call with another investor buddy. They were talking about something, and I actually overheard them talking about how much trash demo should be, and I was about to like pay 3 times what I should. I'm like, what the heck? So actually that one trip to a Mavericks game, I think ended up saving me about 10 12 grand. But Tavis and Tabitha have had season tickets there at the Mavericks for how many season ticket seasons have y'all done?
2014.
Oh, cool.
So we're coming up on 10 years, I guess.
Nice. So they love the Mavericks. Well, this week, last couple weeks have been big news in Maverick land, and Mark Cuban, the owner, Shark Tank personality and owner of the Mavericks, has decided to sell a majority stake in his franchise for several $1 billion. I guess the billions have sort of been debated, 2 billion to 4 billion, somewhere in there. Interestingly, though, he sold it to a family that owns a bunch of casinos in Las Vegas, the Adelson family,
the
Sands, and I think they might own the Venetian. Sheldon Adelson has passed away, but his wife is in charge of the Empire now. And random story, I have a cousin that is an editor for the Dallas Morning News, but before she came here, she worked for the Vegas paper, and he owned that paper. So he's in all sorts of businesses. And so news that they're coming, they're buying the franchise and they own casinos. And so this week, no surprise, a sleuthy detective went around and figured out that the Adelson family, a while back before any of this was announced, bought 108 acres of land in Irving, Texas, near the old site of Texas Stadium where the Dallas Cowboys played. So it does seem like at some point there will be a resort, and most likely by that time a casino in Dallas. Casinos are not legal in Dallas, but they are working towards that. And I think probably by the time this all, the AAC rent, the lease there, I think is in 2031 or something like that. By the time that's up, I think we will have a beautiful resort and casino in Irving. So you told me yesterday you drove by it. So what do you think about all this?
Yeah, well, and just to fill it in, obviously it's not 100% confirmed, but how they did this was they found the LLC called Village Walk RE2 LLC, and then found the county records taxpayer mailing address lines up with the same business address for the Sands. So that's how they connected the dots.
Yep.
It's actually makes a lot of sense because when this came out a couple weeks ago, I was like, man, I know Cuban owns a bunch of land there just across 35, across from AAC, but I just don't see that the land capacity being there. I mean, he would have to buy a lot of warehouses over there, stretching from 35 to Irving Boulevard for that to make sense, right?
Well, and that hotel that we just talked about changed hands right there on that corner. He didn't buy that, so that's a good indicator,
Yeah. So driving by the spot yesterday, right? It's old Texas Stadium. Again, it's just this vacant, big triangle now, right, where the stadium used to be. And you see kind of a fancy, train bridge that's built there. And, I know there's been all kinds of different speculation on what that's going to be. It was going to be mixed use and kind of a train station kind of hub. And I know there's another like stopping point for the train station just on the other side of Loop 12 and 114 there, just a little bit west. But there's some new housing developments and stuff like that right in the corner of 183 and Loop 12 right by University of Dallas. So there's definitely some activity going on around there. But if you look out to the site, this 180 acres, it is just this big, wide open space of land just on the other side of 114, just east side. But driving by, you've got a clear view of the skyline, right, of Dallas. I mean, you're not far from downtown right there.
No.
So it would make sense for it to be a big casino resort, stadium for the Mavericks and just be, eyesight away from downtown Dallas. And, it makes a lot of sense from just a location of where you've got three major highways kind of merging together, or actually four different highways kind of merging together in that location.
Kind of
Plenty of
between
room.
Fort Worth and Dallas, it's in the
Yeah,
middle of the
plenty of
big
room for
areas there.
parking. I mean,
Hmm.
Texas Stadium was in a great spot for years, but it was an antiquated stadium, right? So, um, it it this is actually just a little bit east of this, and so I still wonder what the Texas Stadium actual site itself is going to become, but it would make sense now if that becomes mixed use and being adjacent from a big resort. Um, that makes sense, right? So,
Yeah.
anyways, it makes perfect sense. I mean, obviously these guys at this level, when they're trading billions of dollars in real estate and professional team franchises, are way way ahead of their time than what we know, right? I mean,
Hmm.
they're thinking about this stuff 10 years ago, and now we just now are hearing about it. But this stuff has been in plans for a long time. This stuff doesn't happen overnight. So, just like all of the land up and down the tollway has been predetermined who entitled that land 10, 15 years ago, right?
Hmm.
And even sometimes 20 years ago, all the way to the Red River. It's just something that we don't play at that level,
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, so uh, it's amazing when this stuff kind of comes out, because again, all the publicity now, and we're like, oh wow, what are they doing? And
Yeah.
gambling's not legal here, but you dig into it a little bit further, there seems to be enough information there that it sounds like it's the legalizing gambling is going to be on the docket in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, they've
From
been trying
something
to
I've
pass
read.
it, and for people that don't know, Texas legislature actually only meets every 2 years.
Yeah.
Our legislature is not a professional one, so they all are lawyers and doctors, and they have other jobs, and so they go down to Austin every 2 years. I think for a couple months they do their deal. They typically have local offices in their district. They do their business kind of throughout the other periods of time. Then they have these special sessions, which they're actually just called their fourth special session, where the governor can say, hey, everybody come back into town for this week or this weekend. We're going to handle this one issue. So they can still get business done. But I think they're going to have probably 3 sessions between now and when the lease is up at the AAC. I mean, of course, they would have to start building well ahead of that. Now, the Adelson family is a huge Republican donor. They've donated a ton to the Abbott campaign. Dan Patrick, who's our lieutenant governor, has said over my dead body that we're going to have gambling in Texas. So there will be this friction point. But I mean, the reality is, Dallas feeds Oklahoma gambling and Shreveport gambling. So it would only make sense that if they could figure it out here. And I don't think that a multi billionaire family that's in that business would, sort of take just a flyer that might be able to put up a hotel, or it could be maybe a casino. I have to think that they've had some handshake deals to say, look, we're willing to put in, $10 billion into the Dallas area, but this is what this is going to happen for us. So, you never know. Now, to that end, another piece of news. So DFW area statistically is the fourth largest metro area in the country. Um, that being said, is we have the 16th, roughly. I don't know if this included Fort Worth. I know Dallas was the 16th ranked public transit system in the country. Even if you consider Fort Worth, they have some trains and stuff, but overall we're lacking. We don't have a subway system. We have our DART system, and I don't know what they call it in Fort Worth. Um, but Carrollton, the city of Carrollton, where I live, has announced a $1 billion investment into trains and the public transit system. There's going to be a huge building and sort of a 2-train intersection there in Carrollton. There's already a stop there. They've already put a ton of money into downtown. I'm excited because they've had several concerts down there. There's some great restaurants already down there, and another $1 billion that's going to bring, more apartments, more, developments and shops and all sorts of stuff. I think is going to be awesome. And so Carroll, that spot on I-35 is honestly not that far from Irving and all that stuff. And so if you could go over to Carrollton and hop on a little train and go to a Mavericks game, which you can go downtown now, but if you can go over to Irving and maybe get over to a Cowboys game, eventually, I think it'd be really, really fun. So I don't know if you've spent much time in downtown Carrollton or if you've ever taken the Dart down to a Mavericks game, but I've done it once and it was cool. It was a cool experience.
Yeah. No, it's you know, they definitely have improved in the last 20 years the train system, here in the DFW area. I mean, now going all the way into downtown Denton, you have that rail that goes all the way up there.
Mm-hmm.
The rails that go all the way to DFW and then into Tarrant County, downtown Fort Worth,
Mm-hmm.
and all the way as far as north as Plano currently,
Yeah, I think that's
here
the
on
last
this
stop,
side.
downtown Plano.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, um,
Yeah, it's exciting. I know Plano actually passed a approval for an above ground kind of gondola type system, that'll be more for not show, but you're not getting a lot of places. You could probably skip some traffic there. They've talked about for years a bullet train between Dallas and Houston.
yeah,
That's never really happened. Now that Elon lives in Texas, it'd be cool if he got his boring company and did a tunnel somewhere, see how that worked. But Austin has so much bedrock that might be tough. But yeah, we have a lot of clay up here. He could experiment, so that'd be kind of cool. Yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. I mean, public transit would be great. It definitely helps traffic. Decongest the traffic. We've got a lot of traffic and we've got a lot of toll roads, and so I mean, I paid my toll bill the other day, and goodness gracious, we got to stay off the toll roads. It's either stay off the toll roads or figure out how to flip another house.
especially if you go out west. We made that trip to Abilene, not this last weekend, but the weekend before, and I'm sure I spent a lot, right? Because
yeah,
I mean,
yep,
820 is always a nightmare.
yep.
And
Get on
so
that express.
you get on the express and you just
Heck
cruise
yeah.
like it's a
Yeah, you're
normal
going 80
highway.
miles an hour and you see a sign that says, between X and Y is like $5.30. You're like, what the heck just happened? I'm like, you're racking up $12 in tolls going from,
Yeah,
here over to Fort Worth. But yeah, I mean, it's not
they
all
get
like
me
that,
though.
but
I'll pay for it all day,
yep.
man.
Yeah, you're just flying.
you know,
Yep.
it's always one of those things. I have this. My brother-in-law is a GC, contractor, handyman guy, and he like refuses to take the tolls. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, bro, you charge $50 an hour to do what you do,
Mm-hmm.
and you won't spend $5 on the tollway.
Yeah.
I mean, so you're
Yeah.
gonna sit in traffic for an hour, or
Yeah.
go back ways. It's gonna take you an hour longer, to avoid $5, but you charge $50 an hour. That makes no sense at all.
Yeah, I
You
see
know,
it both ways. If I was ever president, my rule would be if you're on a toll road and there's an accident and I'm only creeping along at 10 miles an hour, that's free because
yeah,
I'm here to
yeah,
go fast. And so if it slows down, I proportionally get a discount
yeah.
on
You
my
shouldn't have to
toll,
pay to sit in traffic like the
No, if
Dallas
I
North
wanted to go this
Tollway.
slow, I would go over there for free. And so,
Yeah,
yeah,
the Dallas North Tollway going south.
no, going to a Mavericks game at 5 o'clock on a Friday. Good luck on that. So, all right. Well, we're going to briefly touch on a little bit of talk on goals. A lot of our listeners, I think 30% of our 800,000 weekly listeners are real estate professionals. And so we wanted to talk about goal setting. And actually, I was just talking about this with Tavis. We're going to get together for a lunch. And it's cliche at the end of the year, going into January. Let's figure out our goals. But honestly, for me, it's a lot of it is I'm finishing up this flip. I have another listing in the works. I'm at a place where I can really take a deep breath and say, okay, what do I want? I feel like I got some traction. I got some momentum. I've seen what it takes to get some of these results. Okay, my average flip has been this over the last 4. Okay, so Tavis, kind of talk to us about your mindset, the math, how you go about setting goals. I know it starts with you basically pick a number, like where, and Mark talked about that, how much you want to make. Okay, let's work back from that. So how do you normally go about that?
Yeah, so I think you can apply this to both things. To traditional real estate as well as investing in real estate. Pretty much anything that you're self-employed with, that you're dictating how much money you're going to make in a year. kind of works the same way, right? So you figure out what you want that number to look like, and then figure out, what's your average per unit. And if you've never done this before, it might be a little trickier, but you look at your past business and say, okay, this is my average, um, traditional listing. Say, the average sales price is $300,000. So the average gross commission on that deal would be $9,000. So if it's $9,000 gross per deal, then how many of those deals do you need to do, per month? How many of those deals do you need to do per year to achieve those gross income numbers that you're trying to make, right? Obviously, you need to know, what your cost of business is, and that's going to come off the top. It gets a little bit more complex, but just from the gross side of it is, how many $9,000 commission checks do you need to make to meet your annual gross income deals? And for somebody like you, Ashton, or somebody that's trying to transition out of like a salary position, that's where you start. You kind of just say, how do I make what I'm making now?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're making $100,000 a year, that's roughly $8,000 a month. So from that perspective, if you're making a gross $8,000 a month, I guess that's like $96,000 a year. But
you're basically having to do one house a month just to
yeah. So
just to
you need to
cover
do
that.
basically 12 transactions a year to
Mm-hmm.
offset that income, right? So if you need to do that, then you have to go a little deeper and say, okay, in order to get this listing and to sell this listing, how many appointments do I need to go on in order to achieve that? And then how many appointments do you need to set a week in order to get that? So let's say that you set 5 appointments a week and your average is, 2 out of 5 appointments that you may actually, get a listing. Then you need to figure out, okay, if it's 5 appointments a week, then that's basically 60 appointments a year. And out of those 60 appointments a year, you're going to convert 2 listings. And so that's going to be now 24 listings out of the year. And, what's your sell rate going to be? Obviously we'd like to think that it's 100%, that you're going to sell 100% of your listings, but that may not be true. So you may have to look at that percentage and say, well, I'm going to sell 90% of that, and so in that case, that means you're going to give up essentially 2 to 3 listings out of that. So now your net number is going to be about 21 listings a year. Okay, so 21 listings a year times 9, right, is essentially going to be somewhere in that 20 listings, right, somewhere in that range. So you're going to end up with about 20 listings, 20 sales for the year, that you're gonna end up with, right? So now you're talking about $180,000, and then you back that out, and figure out what your cost of business is, right?
Your splits and all that.
Yeah. And one of the things you need to figure out is, in order to get 5 appointments a week
or a
what
month.
do you
I think
to,
you're saying 5 a week, but I think you're telling 5 a month, because 5
well,
a month.
You need 5
times
appointments
12.
a week. You need 5 appointments a week to potentially get two listings, right? Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. That's 5. Yeah.
I mean,
in order to meet that
your math is
$100,000
great. I mean, I was
in order to meet
I was distracted ordering my Ferrari for a second. Hold on.
I just doubled your production, right? So that was
man.
not only that's
in.
what it was. Sorry, I just doubled.
Let's do this.
I just doubled your $100,000 a year income. No, so if it's that, then yeah, you need to figure out, how do you get 5 appointments a month to potentially get 2 listings a month,
right?
And
right.
What does that look like?
Well, and then I know for you and me, we're we'll definitely talk more about this at the beginning of the year, because I think we're going to sit down and actually go through these, and maybe we can just talk about our goals. We can speak it into existence. I'm really getting into this speaking into existence stuff. So so for you and me, you have the traditional, but then you have wholesale. So you have a traditional number that you make on each wholesale, and you have your flips. So you can do it along the line, whatever business you're in. And if you don't have that track record, like for instance, if you don't have a track record with traditional listings, you can look at the MLS and say, hey, I want to sell in this area. The average price for us on our overall in the MLS, we know, is $440,000. you can narrow that down even more. And you can say, well, in my area, honestly, it's 500. Well, okay, well, then you can do your math that way. If you wanted to learn wholesale, go find 3, 4, 5 people who wholesale and say, hey, you don't have to give me all your numbers, but what is your average assignment fee? Okay,
Right.
10 grand, 15, 20, whatever. Okay, then you have some numbers to work on. But the key is backing into the activity that, and in a lot of times you won't even know that until you get into the weeds for long enough. How many mailers do I have to send out to get calls? How many calls do I need to get to go on appointments, and how many of those are going to close? Okay,
Right.
now I know how many mailers to send out, which means I know how much I have to spend on that. How many doors do I need to knock on to get an appointment? How many cold calls do I need to make? Or whatever your lead gen is, that's where you have to back into.
Right. So, if, in that case, using what we were just talking about, if you're going to get 5 appointments a month, to list a house, for instance, how many phone calls does that make to set those appointments? Right. So you got to figure out that part, and how many social media posts do you need to do to get a lead? And, it's a combination. It's not all one thing or all another thing. It's a combination. And for somebody like you or for me, the benefit of kind of doing multiple things is, you can say, hey, okay, so, 5 listings a month would be great. But if I can do 2 listings a month, or 1 listing a month, right? I think that was our goal, what we just talked about. Out of 5 appointments, you might get 2 listings. So let's say you get 1, right? You get 1 traditional listing. That's 12 listings out of the year. And then, to make up the difference, then it looks like, okay, you're going to flip 1 or 2 houses. You're going to wholesale, 5 wholesale leads, right? And what is that average? And so then you kind of look at that from that perspective. When we start doing the goal setting for you or for me, then I'm looking at that. And like, for instance, with me, one of my equations of income is I have like 3 main income streams that I look at, that I goal set for. One of them, which I'm probably one of the most passionate things about and really thinking wealth building, is how many rentals or how many investment properties do I have that's bringing in X amount of cash flow after all expenses, and what does that number look like, for that annual income number. And so that's been part of my goal setting over the last couple of years, is trying to build up those buckets to say, okay, I'm getting X amount of money in each year from my rentals. So I have this much income coming in from that. And then I do the design work, the consulting, and the actual architectural designs as well. And so I kind of look at that and say, okay, how many of those projects do I do a year, and what's my average return on those? And that's another little bucket, right? Is that, is it 20 grand? Is it 50 grand? What does that number look like that I make for doing design work and consulting work? And obviously bread and butter for me is wholesale and flipping. That's probably my largest income stream that comes in. And then I do traditional stuff too, a few things here and there. And so I've got like 4 different buckets of income that I look at, right? And I think you can graduate to that and look at it in that as you grow your business and you grow your real estate portfolio. I think, George talked about this, and it was great. And it was great to hear it with Brett's interview as well, that, you should be, as a real estate professional, you should be thinking, how do you become the number 1 investor in your portfolio, right? How does that limelight shed on you? How do you look at it as you being the number 1 investor that needs to buy and build your own portfolio, so that you have those income streams coming in that are going to be infinite or allow you to build on? This conversation Tabitha and I were having recently is about, at some point, for us to graduate into bigger deals, we're going to have to sell some stuff. And I have this mentality because I think one of my biggest regrets over the years, the last 20 years of real estate, has been like not keeping more, and now it's like, what? I don't know, man. I don't know if I want to sell anything, but I think in order for us to graduate into bigger stuff, for us, like, we go to these sports complexes all the time for Landon, and we're like, man, we need to own one of these things.
Yep, I thought that about volleyball. Yeah, we've done a lot of volleyball.
Exactly.
Man, this is a warehouse. Yeah. This is a warehouse with a nice floor, and a couple of spare bathrooms in there. Yeah, no, I've definitely.
And they're charging spectators. Oh
yeah, there's 1,000 people here, and I just paid. Yeah, I do that math the whole time there too. So, no, I mean, I think it's fun to goal set. It's fun to dream. Putting together a dream board. And man, and this year's just been such a roller coaster. There's been weeks I've been really down. What is it gonna? What am I gonna do? And then you have times when you're up. And being around good people and being around investors that are thinking big, it's awesome. And I greatly appreciate all the input you've had in my life for this year. And I'm so glad that we're touching base with some of these other investors. That being said, let's go ahead and plug Brett Lane. He's going to be with us next Tuesday. He's with Myers Home Buyers. Great interview. He invests in himself. He's been with Myers, who's a big wholesaler in Dallas. Tavis has done a ton of business with them. A super stand-up company that has great processes, and Brett has a lot of great insight into the world of wholesaling, but he also flips himself. And he's the only professional soccer player I've ever talked to. So you want to tune in to the interview with Brett Lane coming up this next Tuesday. That being said, I'm going to be out next week going to Chicago, you guessed it, for another band event. And my daughter's band their middle school band was invited to an international conference up in Chicago, super high honor. So that we're going to be having a great time up there. And then I'll be back. And then when I come back, we're going to Austin for Christmas. And then Tavis will be out on an amazing vacation. So by the time we get back together next time, we will have traveled the globe, and Tavis will have a nice tan, and I will be wind whipped by the Windy City. So yeah, but stay tuned. We're going to keep bringing you interviews and info. It may look a little different over the next couple of weeks, but please keep an eye out. If you haven't already, please subscribe. Please give us a review, a 5-star review. And most importantly, share it with a friend, a colleague, someone who you think would benefit from this information. We put a lot of time and effort into the editing and all the content. Like, we really want to bring you value. So let us know what you'd like to hear about. If you want any more details about something we've talked about, we'd love to bring that, whatever you would find value with. But you've been awesome. It's been so much fun doing this so far, and I can't wait for this next year to see what it has to bring into our lives as far as the podcast go and real estate and all that stuff. So anyway, until next Tuesday with Brett Lane, it's been great. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.